Our second panel is called Refugee Women in East and West Germany, where we will be speaking about the process of applying for asylum in the DDR and the BRD. How was the access to studying, working, housing, and to healthcare, as well as about the interaction between former asylum seekers with the local society? And we have a question. Did women self-organize themselves? It's a pleasure to invite to stage the speakers, Speaker Saideeh Sadaat-Lendle and Nancy Larenas, and the moderator, Maria do Mar Castro Varela. Welcome.
Beginne ich. Mein Name ist Maria do Mar Castro Varela.
Then I'm going to start. My name is Maria do Mar Castro Varela. I'm a teacher at the Simon University, and it's a great pleasure for me to be a moderator. I'm very happy to have been able to answer the question. Now I have found some space. I can sit down here. I'm really very grateful to the interpreters. It's one of the most difficult jobs in life to be able to do some interpretations. And when you have a name like Castro, it's very difficult to speak even slowly, so I'm going to do my best. We have two women here. Said, I know her from I've been knowing her for many years, and also Nancy. What is our topic today? Can you hear me? In the GDR and as well in the Federal Republic of Germany, it's important to see how the two systems worked. There were different, which kind of barriers were women had to face, and what were the possibilities and opportunities. Was it slow? Well, we just carry on like this. You know, in each movement, we'll try to slow down, but it doesn't work each time. I'm going to really talk very quickly so that each time she will touch me. We are in a time in Europe when there are even more people who are migrating, and scenarios are built up full of wars and fears. And refugees women, especially women, are associated with everything which has to do with one concept, that is traumatic experience. People have the impression that everybody that leaves a country where they were living are going through a traumatic experience. It's true for very many people, but not for everybody. It doesn't mean that traumatic experience prevents you from building up your future, from performing the kind of political work that we've been doing in our country, and to give new impulses to the society when you have migrated to. I think that we have two women that are the embodiment of this ISD, and who have realized this kind of objective. On the one side, Saideeh Sadaat-Lendle. In Iran, she worked in the underground movement. Even slower. I have to slow down. My goodness, I'm going to do that. She has been working in the underground movement, and she had performed political activities. In 1985, she was seeking asylum in Germany. So many years ago today. You know her, who live in Berlin. She is the director of the Antidiskriminierung und Anti-Gewalt-Bereich. So it's a counseling service in Germany against discrimination and against violence. And this is something that has been building up. This is one of the few especially directed service to lesbian, bisexual, and trans migrant women, and black lesbian, bisexual, and trans. She's a psychologist. You studied psychology at the Freie Uni in Berlin. These were times, I'm telling you. And she's a diversity trainer and a freelance lecturer. And she had also is a teacher as the Solomon University for Peace and Studies. And to profile belongs as well studies about discrimination, racism, gender, sexuality, intercultural competencies, language, and discrimination. It's so nice that you managed to join us. And then Nancy Larenas, she has a PhD in architecture. She comes from Chile, and she was active there in the Popular Front, who supported the Chilean President Salvador Allende, who was murdered later. 1978, she went to seek asylum to Germany because of her political work. And for a long time, she stayed in Germany, in the DDR, and she was granted as well political asylum. And she restarted her studies at the University of Architecture because she started studying architecture in Chile. And then she worked for the Wohnungsbaukombinat, a nationally owned housing construction enterprise. And she has been working in the field of construction research and cultural heritage preservation. And she's a chairwoman of the Chile Friendship Society Salvador Allende. And she has carried on this political work that she started before she was seeking asylum. We will start with a short input by Nancy Larenas. She's going to talk about the story of asylum-seeking process and why she has joined us here on stage, on the panel. Hello. I thank you, really, because you are here and because you invited me. And what I would like to say is that for the first time in my own life, I will be speaking before an audience. That is the very first time in my life. I'm not a migrant, I wanted to say. No, I'm not a migrant woman, because migrant means that it would be a voluntary decision. And if you seek asylum, you have to think where you can survive. Which kind of country is going to grant you asylum or to host you? That is a question. Actually, as a migrant, you can select a country. But if you seek asylum, you're not in a position. You're just looking for a country in order to be able to survive. I was born in South Chile, and I'm a daughter of a woman who was a housewife. I grew up in a Catholic family, and I went to a Catholic school. As a young person, I didn't think that begging could solve social problems, and I didn't think that injustice could be fought in that way. For instance, for women in a macho country like Chile. I wanted to stay in Valparaiso, where I was born, and I wanted to do something in this region, in this city where there was a military base. With the victory of the Cuban Revolution, could you go back, please? Sorry. This is what I wrote. So 1979, there was a turning point in the history of Latin America. That was the victory of the Cuban Revolution. It was for us a very great hope and gave as well emancipatory impulses to the population of these countries in Latin America. On the 4th of September 1970, Salvador Allende won the presidential election with the support of the Popular Unity Unida Popular, the Popular Front. And you can see President Salvador Allende, after this victory at the election, you can see a massive demonstration, 1970. And he is with the Nobel Prize winner Pablo Neruda, a poet. And this is a picture of the stadium in Santiago de Chile after the coup. It was used as a concentration camp. Between 1970 and 1973, I was a member of the Mapuche Front and the Popular Front. We wanted to, I was part of this borough where there was an organization, a committee of control which was fighting illegal markets. That is, so in order for people could have access to food with adequate prices. I was newly married. That is a picture of me. But then, on the 11th of September 1973, Augusto Pinochet led a very brutal military coup where all the democratically elected people, especially the president of Chile, Salvador Allende, was victim of the coup and was murdered. I lived in Valparaiso at this military base. Early on the 11th of September 1903, it was occupied by the military, and they were, and all the members of the Popular Front were persecuted. During this operation, people were looking for the people who had supported the president, the president Allende. At universities and elsewhere, all houses were searched, people were arrested. The military took over, and at the same time, the U.S. Marine was as well just in front of the coast of Chile. So there was some understanding between the military from Chile and the military from the U.S. People were no longer allowed to leave their houses, and all the people who were suspected of being member of these unitary fronts, popular fronts, were not allowed to seek refuge anywhere. So people were not allowed to host them and to give them refuge. There were also these paramilitary units, and all the people who were members of the front had to leave their houses like we did, or their flats, because we were facing this kind of persecution and fearing for our life. There was a lot of denunciation from the neighbors, or as well, they communication ways were used for propaganda. So it was very difficult for us to find a way to take refuge anywhere. But our space was limited more and more. Our husband was also wanted, and we were living in the underground. On the 11th of September 1988, 25 years after the military coup, there were some documents who were actually released from the National Security Archive, according to which the former U.S. Foreign Minister, Henry Kissinger, had already met with the CIA agents in 1970 in order to prepare for the military coup and to discuss about it. 1973, he was awarded the Peace Nobel Prize. I have to slow down? Oh, okay. These are the scene just after the military coup. You see, all the palace was underbombed. You see, Salvador Allende La Moneda. This is the presidential palace, and here you see the stadium where people were arrested. About 40,000 people who were incarcerated there. So they were arrested and kept there. This was mass actions, and it was really very dangerous because anytime you could be arrested. And as a woman, it was very dangerous. There were terrible actions of rape. It was just systematic. As a woman, when we were arrested, we were raped. So what about the Federal Republic of Germany and the military coup in Chile? There was no statement about the military coup, no statement against the military coup. The idea was to avoid confrontation with the regime at any cost. On the other side, the government of the Federal Republic of Germany, there was people who were persecuted, were denied asylum. And it was not only, it was also not possible to give refuge according to normal international law. Only if they were facing direct risks for your life, it was possible. And the people who were deciding upon this refusal or the granting of refuge kind of refuge were the people from the embassy. And if we were not granted this kind of refugium, then you were facing torture, concentration camp, and torture. It's only as late as November 1973, the Federal Republic of Germany decided to accept 100 political people were facing political persecution, but they have to be checked before they could travel, and whether they were actually ready to work and capable of work, and they have to be checked upon not being a criminal or political active and violent person. There was a special commission which were made of also civil servants from the Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution. So this is the passport that I've received. So these members of this Office for the Protection of the Constitution were also checking. So what was happening in the Federal Republic of Germany? What was the political environment? In this context, the Minister President of Baden-Württemberg, his name was Filbiger, he said in 1974 that it should be only exceptions, and that because of security reasons, people should not be let in Germany, and the guarantees for the security of the citizens should not be put at stake. And something similar came from Rheinland-Pfalz. So Rhineland-Palatinate. And in the press, space as well played as well a role against a friendly environment for Chile, people from Chile. In the Bayern Courier, the CSU Chancellor candidate Franz Joseph Kohrs wrote, because of the chaos that is prevailing in Chile, the word order sounds sweet to the ears of the people from Chile. The CDU General Secretary Bruno Hegg said, as far as we can see or verify, the military regime takes care of the prisoners. This was a very difficult situation, and the only way out that we found is to fund support in the German embassy in Santiago de Chile. In a very conspirative context, I managed to have access to the residence of the embassy of the German Republic, and I had to obey to certain rules. There were conditions. I had to be a German citizen. If not, I would not even have access to the embassy. There was, as I mentioned, there was a special commission which came in November to Chile. And I was also heard by this commission, and they asked me questions during this long time at the residence of the ambassador of Germany. And a picture was taken as well. They were asking me questions about my political work, etc., and activities. So, as I said, I had to go through security checks, and I've been known by the Home Office, the German Home Office. It was very difficult for the embassy to provide us for some assistance, and in November '73, the situation became much more acute for my husband. The mass arrests were growing. The intelligence services and the military regime was really trying to target people in a much more acute way. They were trying to find leading and to identify leading people of the trade unions, of the Popular Front, students' leaders, peasant organizations, farmers' organization. In Valparaiso, the industry where my husband was working had a list of their employees, and they knew who of them were members of the parties and who were actually supporting former President Allende. And they would pass on these lists on the military regime. And they were taken from the factories in lorries to concentration camps in the northern part of the country, or to ships of the marine, for instance, to be deported, and to concentration camps to be tortured. The Marines had led actions, and they were also trying to find us. They searched our house, the house of my step-parents and of my parents in Valparaiso. Comrades were arrested one after the others, were tortured, were brought to concentration camps, or were murdered. My father was laid off by his employees, and my sister was expelled from university. And in that situation, it was more difficult to survive. The country was completely controlled from the northern to the southern part of the countries. Surveillance was really top of the agenda. And what about my husband and the right for asylum? It was a scandalous situation. My husband was a German citizen and was persecuted by the fascist regime between 73 and 79, and he actually fled to Germany. And because he was on the list of 14 members of the fronts that were running away, the German embassy saw no reasons for granting him asylum. This is why his application for asylum was rejected by the embassy, but he objected to it, and he resisted the injunction to leave the embassy, and this is why he could stay in the embassy. It was at the beginning of November 73. My space was reduced every day, and it was more difficult to support other members, including in Santiago. This is why I decided, after consulting members of my party, to leave the country. That is some press reports of that time, 73, in the Federal Republic of Germany, and what the papers were writing, the Westfälige Zeitung and the FAS. This is something that clearly appeared. People from Chile were considered as a threat to the security of Germany, and it was really a process of stigmatization. Only 4,000 people were granting asylum. We're talking about a population of 60 million people. It's only 4,000 people from Chile. How is it possible that 4,000 people could become a threat? But the refugees from Chile who didn't play a significant role in Germany. But it was the first major group from Chile out of Chile in Europe. On the 2nd of December, in the second weeks of December 1973, I arrived in Germany, in Frankfurt, and it was a very rainy day, a very grey day. It was a collective accommodation for refugees coming from the former East German states. The people who have been there for a while were not integrated. In one little room of this collective accommodation for refugees, it was possible to sleep peacefully, and that was something absolutely extraordinary in this context. There was a common kitchen, you had also basin, and you could also have toilets for several families. But what has disturbed me, is that could not cook without money. If you wanted to cook, then you had to insert coins so that the oven would work. We were given 150 Deutsche Mark per head for food, and you could have access to second-hand shops to have clothes. There were German courses for Spanish-speaking people in Frankfurt and Main, but not in Hanau. In the course of time, it became more and more difficult for me to live in this collective refugee accommodation. It was as if I fell down a very big kind of trap. I was completely deprived of social contacts. I was in an unfamiliar environment despite the very strong solidarity movement of the left-wing movement. It was difficult to live in that condition of asylum, being halfway Chilean and halfway German citizen. I met with groups who didn't meet with others, and a group who didn't want to welcome others. What you only find as a job in the industry was underqualified jobs, and this increased as well the frustration. I became ill, and as a pregnant woman, I needed to stay in bed. This is why the USO, so the youth organization of the Social Democratic Party, offered us some flats. Without this strong support, it would have been even more terrible to live there. As a politically motivated people, we just hope for the end of the military coup, and we were hoping that the regime will soon be overcome. We also experienced the strong solidarity with Chile at that moment. And when we talk about the situation in Germany, we decided to carry on our political work in Argentina. Before we traveled to Argentina, we were invited in Cuba. I didn't want to miss the opportunity to see this country that had inspired us with this revolution of '59, especially in view of the major positive changes that had occurred since. And this is where my son was born. 1973, we were on our way to Argentina. But the military also led the coup against President Perón, and it was very dangerous as well for people who had political activities to stay there. Because of the coup, there was a dictatorship that also was in power for 7 years, and many Chileans also were murdered at that time in Argentina. That is, these are pictures from this coup in Argentina. And what about our party? So we actually managed to go to the German Democratic Republic because actually we were just hanging on. We could not go to Argentina, neither to Argentina nor to Chile. And at the end of the day, thanks to our party, we managed to find our way to the German Republic of Germany. And then we, just after it was known that Salvador Allende had been murdered, and the military took over in the German Republic of Germany, in Chile. The German Democratic Republic broke any kind of diplomatic relation to Chile. And that was on the 25th of September 1973. 2 weeks after the military coup led by Pinochet, the German Democratic Republic of Germany, that is the Politburo, decided to lead solitary measures in order to take on political refugees from Chile. At the same time, there was an anti-fascist Chile committee which was initiated by the representative of the party in order to deal with any thing that had to do with Chileans in the German Democratic Republic. And this anti-fascist Chile committee was initiated by a representative of the party Unidad Popular. After 4 weeks of stay in an accommodation by the free trade unions of the German Democratic Republic, we received 5,000 Deutsche Mark per head, and we had also a flat, and we had furniture and items that we needed in order to be able to lead a normal life. And that corresponds to what a worker in the German Democratic Republic was received.
Die in sehr niedrige Raten, 5% des Nettoeinkommens, zu bezahlen waren. Wir bezogen unsere Wohnung im Stadtteil Magdeburg Reform. Nach 5 Tagen in der Stadt hatte ich einen Arbeitsplatz als Bauzeichnerin im Wohnungsbaukombinat Magdeburg.
Wohnungsbau of Magdeburg. All the women then became the material conditions to be able to take up work. Especially childcare facilities were important and necessary to provide for women to work. The aim was to have equal opportunities for women in East Germany. The rights of women were established by law in 1950. Now, when it comes to family planning, the women were able, since 1972, to choose whether they wanted to have children or not. Now, the so-called contraception for children was provided to women when they wanted to have it. Now, they were able to decide whether they wanted to interrupt their pregnancy or not. For my integration in the German society, my job at the Wohnungsbau was absolutely essential. This is where I learned the German language, because we arrived in Magdeburg very late. We actually missed the German course for Chilean citizens. With the support, however, of my colleagues and also a dictionary, I then started to learn German step by step. Now, in our company, I was surprised that we as women had 1 day free per month, which was called the day for doing housework. There were rooms in the factories where women could withdraw if they were menstruating, if they had their period, or whether they had other problems. And this was the case in all factories across East Germany. Now, the idea to get up very early at such cold weather, especially in winter, and bring our son to the childcare facility and be at the office at 6:45 For us Chilean women, that was not always very easy. However, as time came, we got used to it. And of course, we also wanted to learn a lot about the country. After 2 years in that factory, I was accepted at the University of Weimar. This is where I was delegated to go. And this is where I wrote my Diplomarbeit, my diploma basically, and then the family moved to Jena. And after my PhD, basically, sorry, it was not diploma, it was PhD. After my PhD, I then started to work in interior construction. As a young woman, I always had contact with young people in Germany, especially during my time in Weimar and Jena. I had friends. We celebrated, we had parties, also with our Latin American fellow students. Now, the provided material needs and the solidarity that existed in East Germany and the openness of the people in East Germany based on the non-existing pressure of competition, as we see currently, made it possible for me to integrate very easily. And I was able to get some kind of internal balance. The solidarity with Chile was an important topic in East Germany. And Woodviertel? Today we have a borough in Berlin-Köpenick that is named after Salvador Allende, and there's even a street called after Pablo Neruda. In the 1980s, the Chilean authorities allowed me to go back. However, I was not able to establish a financial basis in Chile. There was no apology from the Pinochet government that was in power back then. And also the subsequent governments did not offer an apology, nor did they recognize my diploma as an architect. The next big change in my life was the so-called fall of the Berlin Wall. Or, as this process is known, as the absorption of East Germany into West Germany. That happened in summer 1999. Now, for me, this was a sad chapter in my life, which is still pervasive today. The people in East Germany were never asked about this kind of reunification. Now, with the reunification agreement, the capitalist system was then also introduced in East Germany. And the social conditions and social achievements that were achieved by Eastern German women were then slowly rolled back. And what we see also what happened was that demonetization process started. Now the fiduciary trust then destroyed the entire industrial system in Germany, in East Germany, and that meant a loss of jobs for many East Germans. Furthermore, a lot of people, as I said, lost their jobs, and that had very devastating consequences, especially for women who were no longer able to reach the social security that was available in East Germany. There was also an income gap between East Germany and West Germany, especially among men and women. And this is something that we did not know from the old East Germany. So a lot of East German institutions were abolished. And there was one committee that was deciding about further employment or unemployment. And in the course of this process, my husband lost his job as a research assistant at the University of Jena. Now, the company that I was employed with was also wrapped up, really, and sold and refounded as a new private company. This had a really strong negative consequence for many Chileans because their permanent resident depended on them having a job, and many feared of being deported, especially after the anti-fascist Chilean committee was dissolved. In the 1980s, for many women coming from East Germany, the situation was very bad, especially in Berlin. They could not really come to terms with the situation. Now, I was lucky. Due to my studies, I was able to find a job in the field of construction and memorial reconstruction. And many women in East Germany were not as lucky as I was. I actually wanted to say that the fear of being deported and losing their permanent residence in Germany, this made the Chilean woman to found an association, Gabriela Mistral. And this association supported the Chileans. The association is called Gabriela Mistral and is still active until today. Now, since 2004, I am the I'm the chairwoman of the Chile Friendship Society Salvador Allende in Berlin. This association was founded in 1988 by our colleagues in West Germany. This association offers psychological and material support to Chilean people and also helps the friendship between Chile and Germany. Thank you very much for your attention.
Ja, ganz herzlichen Dank, Nancy. Es war etwas.
Well, thank you very much, Nancy. Your intervention was a bit longer than we planned, and obviously it's probably not easy to really tell your story in such a short period, because the stories are complex and requires time really to tell. What I found very interesting and also important in West Germany, we often thought that in the 1970s things had calmed down. There's no war, everything is peaceful, but it's exactly the time when, in many parts of the world, military dictatorships were existing. There were resistances, riots, there were the big decolonization wars, like for Angola and Mozambique, were waged with huge brutality, and there was only little attention on these processes. However, there was also with Latin America, such as Chile, Argentina, there were big solidarity movements which today no longer exist, and they played an important role. We probably will come back to that later. And I would like to give Saideeh the opportunity to tell us her story. Not the entire story, though. However, maybe she'll be able to sketch out few phases in her life or points or in her political asylum, the political practice in her country, and then also when she came to Berlin. Yeah, Nancy, thank you very much to you from my side. I actually wanted to speak about arriving and philosophize about who arrives here and what does it mean. I actually wanted to discuss this category with you. What we've heard so far were very personal stories, and I realized that, well, my plan is not working out. I possibly also have to be more personal because it's not about philosophizing. Unfortunately, this is possibly not the space for that. So let me say a little bit about myself. I studied in Iran, in Tehran, which is the capital of Iran. I studied mathematics. A year afterward, or 1.5 years after that, the Islamic Revolution started. Unfortunately, the movement was very democratic at the beginning. There were for a very long time strikes in factories, and many students and demonstrated and founded movements, and all these student movements raised awareness on people that were suppressed. They also raised awareness of the fact that there was not freedom of press and that there were restricted liberties, and there were also people who were in prison. The situation of workers was also appalling. So all this was then addressed by these different movements. I was also part of the student movement. We fought against all these atrocities, and we also did not know what regime would follow after that acting. So we also had little information with regard to democratic demands, and I was part of a young generation which was very emotional. We basically just wanted to really eliminate the government and get a new government, because that government was associated with brutality and torture. However, very soon we realized that the new government was quite repressive. They did not allow people with different opinions. So my generation was very strongly politicized. We took to the streets, something that we did not do. So we went to the streets, we spoke to people, we wrote articles, we formed councils, we conducted discussion rounds. So we started to organize ourselves and to come together and to create some kind of structure. Back then, there were a lot of left parties and other Islamic parties, but I was a member of a left party, and that left party considered this government as a fascist government, and we were dealing with various issues and confrontations, and this party was dealing with all sorts of confrontations, and I was part of that. Now, 1.5 years later, the Islamic Revolution was 1978, and the big oppression started. We were very openly politically active for 1.5 years. We were known in universities. Everybody knew us where we lived. So we were all
Ich habe schlicht vergessen.
So sorry, the revolution was not 78 but 79. Okay, I was asked to speak more slowly. Okay, where to start? So we were a very open target because we were very visible. We were very easily detectable. Now, in these oppressions and repressions were involved basically detention of those who thought differently, especially the one who were in left movements or were organized in Muslim parties that were against the acting government. We saw torture, death, or murder, and all of a sudden thousands of people just vanished. I was at the university at the time, and I was sort of relatively known. The police caught me twice while I was doing my political work. One time was I was at the university, and the other time my political group were having a discussion round, and I then went underground. I also ended up in prison one time. My name is Saideeh, that means the lucky one. And my family name is Sadaat, which also means the lucky one. So twice I was able to survive my prison term. I was released, and I then joined an underground group. And this is where I got to know my first love. And so I must say that the prison terms were actually quite helpful or useful, because this is where I started, where I met my first love. Now, during that time, I'm actually getting a little bit emotional. During that time, it was almost like a tree losing its tree slowly and slowly. These people were our friends. These women lived in our apartments. They were politically active with us. We worked together. I don't know what you guys feel. I felt very alone. Many of my community and my surrounding, step by step, somebody vanished. I was then detained with 5 others, and me and another one were released. I was young and very sportive. They probably thought that she just happened to be in that team by accident, so remove her from the prison so that she does not get politicized in prison. This is what I found out later when a friend told me about that. 3 of the 6 persons I was detained with were then executed. One became a member of Tabob, and she herself was engaged in torture. So we were 2 people who were released, and this was the first time that we hugged ourselves after we were released, and we never saw each other again. Now this oppression started by us going underground. I was active there until 1980, and our aim was to give hope to people and to show them that the government and the country would not stay like that, that there is a lot of resistance in the country. Now, workers' movement, student movements, and people's movements that existed, we all collected them and brought them together. We then sort of constructed a print and then photocopied the flyers. So in the evening, we then started to distribute these flyers, especially in neighborhoods with a lot of workers. So we wanted to reach out specifically to workers. Universities were closed as a space for resistance. Schools were also temporarily closed for a specific time. So they basically then threw out everybody, and then later opened the schools again, and the control were more restrictive. We focused on the proletariat. We distributed information in the neighborhood and tried to encourage people that their resistance would be effective, and through that a new government would be able to be established. Now, every committee had about a maximum of 10 persons to avoid again being detained, and I coordinated these different committees which were filled with different persons. In July 1985, we then started to establish contacts with people abroad. So our leading committee was in France and in Germany. And in July 1985, I received a telegram from Germany saying that I had to leave the country very quickly. Apparently, there were indications that my committee that I was part of was under observation, and there was information leading to that, and I would not be detained for now because apparently if they don't detain me, they'll be able to get other people. So it took about 2 days. I then went underground. I told people to leave their apartments. And the people dispersed and tried to remain underground for 3 months. I was able to do that because I didn't have children, and a friend of mine who had children did not manage to go underground. When I was in Germany, I then heard that when I was released, members of my committee were detained. And again, I'm being very emotional at this stage. When I came to Germany, I first went to Turkey. It's almost like in your case, we thought that let's wait first until the danger is over and then we go underground again in a different city. However, my committee did not want that. They said that going to Germany needs to be checked first and Turkey is not safe. After 45 days, I then reached Germany. I must say that I'm a person who was very lucky and who had a lot of privileges. When I was in Germany, or when I arrived in Germany, and also when I was in Turkey, I must say that the left party organized everything for me: my ticket, my flight ticket. When I was in Turkey, when I stayed with a friend of the party, so everything was organized. I had these privileges. Now let me come to the actual topic, arrival. These people helped me to arrive here. The people helped me to arrive here. My party friends welcomed me here. I joined a nationwide Iranian women's organization. I was very well received and was empowered by this organization. That helped me a lot. My objective back then was safety and having the opportunity to talk with other people, discuss with other people, and see how our political future looks like. What can we do in this country? And all this existed already. I was able to have all these opportunities here. For 4 years, I didn't actually need the Germans. I had everything that I needed. I had an apartment, I had possibilities to discuss, to write, to talk. The first 3 years, I only learned 2 German words, Scheiße and Sozialamt. And that was enough for me. And when the Sozialamt did not give me any money, I was then able to use my second word, Scheiße. Now, after 4 years, when it became clear that I would no longer go back to Iran, I had to organize myself differently. And this is when the first problem started. Then I started my first studies, and then work became an issue. The German women's movement, which I wanted to join, became a topic which was not very easy. Back then, as a 30-year-old young woman, I would have loved to have this kind of conference as we're having today. I would have loved to have people translating for me and really overcoming this language barrier, which I did not have back then. Nevertheless, again, coming back to my privileges, the privilege of having an apprenticeship, having friends, having an Iranian women's movement, to have really good friends, to have really good German friends in the autonomous movement. They gave me a lot. And this is the reason where I am now. And I really had the feeling that this is now my home and I won't leave until I retire. And then I joined my current organization, Les Migras.
Das war das Schlusswort. Okay.
Was it your concluding statement? Thank you very much, Saideeh. Thank you for sharing with you on your very difficult way. I think this is one of the objectives of this conference, to hear the stories that very often is being erased and to bring it back to the surface and to be able to talk about it and to put this statement in a context when we can talk about it, when you can also accompany this process the way we have accompanied you through your stories. I was very interested as well in the philosophy of arrival. Maybe I'll give you a few minutes in order to say a few words about it. But if you have questions to Nancy or to Saideeh, you have this opportunity, or comments, or additional questions. Microphone, please.
Ja, also euch auch.
I would like to thank you very much as well for sharing your stories with us. There's something that struck me. In comparison to the panel before, I see a difference. The women from Vietnam share their stories about the German Democratic Republic, what they experienced there, and there is a major difference to the way you have experienced and you speak about the German Democratic Republic. Could it be that as well in the migrant community, I cannot find the word that you used before, that there were differences in terms of privileges, because the Vietnamese women, for instance, they faced major obstacles in order to be recognized and to become visible. And the way you talked about the German Democratic Republic, you had speak in a positive way about the country, and we all know that the German Democratic Republic was no paradise, and for refugees from other countries, it was not exactly this rosy picture you painted. And you said as well that the East German population was not asked. We know that they have been fooled with these reunification agreements, but I remember the slogan of the big demonstration. They were saying, "We are the people," but after that they say that foreigners out of the country. That was the next slogan. So they have been asked, actually. They have opted for this Federal Republic of Germany, not all of them, but actually the majority of them. And as I said, there were major differences between the people who were integrated, who were part of a completely different social class compared to the refugee people, to the other people. So there were differences in between these the migrant population. I think that we will take 3 consecutive questions or comments. Actually, it's not a question. Nancy and Said, thank you very much for your contribution. I'm so happy to hear that you had such a positive arrival in Germany. But it doesn't apply to my situation. And that was the same for many women refugees. I came in the 80s from Iran. I was 2.5 years on the way. I was detained in Germany, in Bavaria, with a refugee camp with people from various countries. And apart from that, at that time, from Iran, there were people who came from various political parties, from various groups. That was part of our problems, because we were no unitary group. We had a lot of tensions between, for instance, the communist parties, the students groups, and the monarchist groups. And that time, at least that was the case in Bavaria, the way I experienced it, there was no possibility to learn German. I was kept 1.5 years in that refugee camp. Amnesty tried through young students to give us the opportunity to learn German, and that was more or less the only possibility. There was no psychosocial counseling. I wait months in order to have the money to travel from Bavaria to Berlin. There was no single person who could help me and tell me how I could get the money. I had to work in an illegal way to be able to gather this money. I could notice there are so many things that are completely different. Many things have changed in a positive way for refugees. Yeah, but I mean, that is exactly the topic. Today, we talk about women together. What it is possible to improve together as women is very important, to share our experiences. But we have also to take into considerations what have changed. I'm so proud of people who have worked as well. And we have also to value the work of women, our work that we have done in favor of refugees. I only would like to ask something. Because of the sensibility and discrimination-free word, please don't use the word black with it's about illegalized work, because the former use the expression in German Schwarzarbeit, so black, so to say black work. There were days when windows became walls. But the people in my country, there were windows that were destroyed. I came here, arrived here. I'm a Kurdish woman. I came from Iran. I've not seen my family for the 6 years. I became a peshmerga. My child was born. the child became no birth certificate, I could not have a positive feeling. I had the impression that I left my child. I left my child behind. I left my family behind. I just have to say that all the people who are sitting here are women. When all women coming from my region come together and would work hand in hand, they would not be detained. They would not wait till we showed solidarity to them. Saideeh, our women became very lonely. I don't do a lot. Many do not do a lot. There were times we were different. But now, in the meantime, a journalist doesn't even can take the courage. Some women as well are burning themselves in Kurdistan. In Greece, the women are also selling themselves. At that time, when my mother paid for me to be staying in a hotel, there were so many slogans, there's so many discourses. I saw as well where other women were prostituting themselves. I was a journalist in Iran. With a microphone, there's many things that you can say. There's so many people. Why do the people go and see? Have a look at Greece. I was there 1.5 years ago. I saw what is happening. I saw it with my own eyes. The other man goes to a hut along with his wife and prostitute her. I was detained. Does Germany know? How is it with Yazidi women? Do all women know what is happening? What is happening with the women? I said I'm a Kurdish woman. When I come from Kurdistan, you look at me. Sometimes you look away and you don't know how to see me. I'm so happy that I was very warmly welcomed, that I was given a passport. There are some people in Iran, they didn't get any passport. I would like to also take my leave and go and have a look at the people who are actually passing away. Thank you very much for this orientation that you gave us and for the comment that you made. There is a concrete question, and maybe you can answer it. Nancy, maybe. The question that was asked, unfortunately, this morning I was not there. This is what I didn't hear, the contribution of this morning about the women from Vietnam in the German Democratic Republic. I must say something. The Vietnamese women had a work contract for 2 years. I think it was the case at that time. That was a contract between the government of Vietnam and the German Democratic Republic. That was a contract with a limited duration, and we were asylum seekers. We could not go back. That is, the Vietnamese had received a qualification, some technical qualification, worked for a while and had to go back. That was the case for the people from Mozambique, from the Cubans, from Morocco as well. There were people as well from there, only a few of them maybe. But that is the first thing. And of course, the publication was not asked. There were mass demonstration in Leipzig or in other cities, but they were completely destroyed, actually verbally, by the press, by the media. And up to now, this is the same. when I have a look at the TV, look at this, there were various channels, but it's everything against the German Democratic Republic. I wanted to say as well, what I've been talking about, it is my experience. That was my experience, and you have to say from the other side, in life, not everything is black or white. There as well, tunes in between. Tones in between, meaning that there are positive aspects of the German Democratic Republic, but also the other side of the medals. We have to talk about it, but I have to say that my experience is as I described it. As I said, not everything is black or white. There were, kind of deficits, shortcomings in the German Democratic Republic of Germany. But to my point of view, to me, to a large extent, the German Democratic Republic has undergone a major development, and that was positive. In terms of social justice, I've never thought, for instance, to reflect about having a job or not having a job. I had my job, I had my flat. Everything could be managed with 600 euro, I would say, Deutsche Mark. My flat just only cost 50 Deutsche Mark. And I was earning 600 something, 1,200 for a family. So it was possible to pay for a flat and also kindergarten, nursery, and these kind of things. And today, what is the situation? It's not possible. Everything has been destroyed. That is, this unemployment, this pressure, you don't know what's going to happen, and all-time pension. Are we going to become all-time pension scheme, to benefit from all-time pension scheme or not? Old age pension, meaning that I don't know whether I can actually receive anything. You have this basic social minimum that you receive, but you have to go to the office, to the social office every 3 months or something to be able to reapply for it. So we don't know what's going to happen next. And this is this insecurity.
15,8, 15,53. Aber
so
Hallo? Noch eine Frage? Ein Kommentar?
In kurzer
So just to be very brief, I had to decide at very short notice what was important to speak, and I don't want to talk about really my suffering, and this is what I used the term privileges, and I said I had the privileges, and I know that many people have suffered much more than I did. And I said I had this opportunity, and many people had very little privilege compared to me. And about what you said in terms of feeling bad, to sit there and not to actually become aware of what is happening somewhere else, and not to be able to induce major changes. This is something that is part of our life. If not, I could not shed tears about my friend that were murdered. I left them behind, and this is a topic that is very much part of my experience. What could we do about it? In whichever field we are active, the only thing that you can do is to be politically active, to be active against racism, against oppression, to support refugee people, to act in favor of empowerment, to create spaces, to give other people spaces so that they can also voice their concern. This is something what we do from 8 in the morning until probably 8 o'clock, or sometimes up to 4 o'clock p.m. Sometimes I don't even, realize that time flows. We cannot do more. If it is not only to destroy us, that is not going to help us, and it's not going to help you. We have to actually to give each other strength so that we pull ourselves together and bring us higher and higher. This is the only thing I can say. I share your suffering, your pain, and also the fact that you have to carry this burden with you and to feel bad about it. The time is over, and I would like to ask you to drive the point. I wanted to be brief. Soraya, she's from Guinea. In Portuguese, okay. And I will translate into English.
E esta conferência, e agradecer também a todos os participantes. Realmente que as conferências são muito importantes para nós, porque eu vivi aqui, ouvi muitas histórias e muitas experiências de vida. E agora eu estou tão emocionado que eu ouvi, porque nunca na minha vida isso me passou pela cabeça, que isso tudo aconteceu. Não sei se repararam, a minha voz está a tremer porque estou muito emocionado com tudo isso.
She wants to experiences, and for being here, it is very meaningful for her. She never thought it was possible that other people were sharing the same pains and troubles and emotions as she is, and it's important for her to recognize herself in others. So she wants to thank everyone that made this conference possible and say that it's really important to keep these encounters happening. And her voice is shaking, she's saying, because she's so emotional.
Mas ao mesmo tempo fiquei muito feliz a saber que realmente tem mulheres fortes. E essas mulheres conseguiram batalhar até chegar a isso, porque eu estou a viver muitos problemas, ouvi muitos problemas aqui, mas eu acho as mulheres que vieram primeiro viveram mais difícil, tiveram mais problemas do que nós e conseguiram lutar até hoje. Estamos a contar essas histórias.
Mas ao mesmo tempo, sorry. But at the same time, she's happy to hear the stories because she's also going through a fight of her own at this moment, and listening to the struggles of others gives her strength and energy to keep going. And she's saying that she's moved by the first women that had to come here because they start a struggle that now is continuing. And we are part of it.
E para finalizar, agradeço, porque estas experiências fez com que estamos a ter força. Eu me fortaleci com tudo isso. Eu vi realmente que tenho que lutar, porque se nós não lutamos, temos que juntar e lutar. Se nós não lutamos, não chegamos a lado nenhum. Estas mulheres, para mim, são uma heroínas.
These women are heroes for her. She thanks for their fight and to give her strength to continue to fight as well. Thank you.
Ja, danke schön. Ich habe nur eine ganz kurze.
Thank you. I just have a short comment about the structure, panel, the division between panel and German audience, and the dialogue between your comments. I didn't get your name, the Kurdish activists and journalists, and you. The way I understood it, and I hope that I will be allowed to voice this, is a very important question that you asked. I didn't hear that it was all about feeling bad about something. It's about the analysis. And I think that this analysis is part of a radical criticism in respect to the status of advancement of the women movement today. Is it possible to talk about Kurdistan, about Syria, to talk about Greece? I'm very thankful that to talk about it. Is it possible to build up an international women movement that is transnational? So I'm very happy about to talk about it. So it has nothing to do with guilt. So we only have the possibility to ask just one more question, and after that, we have to talk outside the official framework. At the beginning this morning, that was a very, very important point. We have to fight, whether it's here or the issue of struggle. In the former German Democratic Republic, I was living there just before the reunification in Halle. I knew many people from Vietnam, from Chile, from South Africa, from other countries. Some had this position and others had another position. There were older people who came as communists to the German Democratic Republic, and they had to fight. And sometimes they came back to their home country, and they were getting more in compared to younger people. But actually, it was not socialism in the German Democratic Germany. The capitalist system was only brought down in terms of removing private property to some extent, but socialism is something else. But still, it at the beginning it didn't have any fear as a woman, but it didn't last so long. You know that whatever system, it didn't stop Nazis from assaulting me. You cannot compare to what is happening now with these people. Of course, you cannot compare the Nazis and what is happened there in the Nazi time. But you know what happened in Rostock? And people who said, stay away from this house. And after the counter-revolution in the German Democratic Republic, people had fears. And then a new system, and that has fear. And this is a threat that was mounting, targeted people with, for instance, black people or other people. And this is all I had to say.
Right, unfortunately, we have to come to an end. We are already lagging behind by 15 minutes, and what we've heard so far has been quite interesting and compact. However, what I find interesting is that what Nancy said, their own experience cannot be judged. You can't say that it was that way or that way, because their own experience is always their own experience. And if you put together their own experiences and see them in that kind of multitude, then we will see various forms of discrimination and various forms of privileges. We'll then also be able to see that, of course, it meant a lot for women to be in the Communist Party. It was a time that was important. These were collectives that worked internationally. Today, we might have a different point of view. However, what is lacking at a theoretical level as well as the practical level, what is lacking is a new form of forging alliances, where the work of the previous collectives, whether the women's movement or the Communist Party, that replace and supplements these previous movements and even improves them. And by means of the analysis that we have, they can look at what has been problematic and thus improve things. However, what we need are new alliances of solidarity. I often say that what we have is contrapunctual solidarities, where different perspectives, also from a geological point of view, have to come together without somebody saying, this is not my future and I want another one. Anyway, one more thing I want to mention, and one word we've heard so far by both the speakers several times, it's hope and future. And alliance politics is required if we want to engage in political work that goes in the direction of hope. And this is something that we should take away from this session, despite the difficulties, issues that were maybe difficult to sustain. Thank you very much to the panelists.